feel like every time we come back to the show, it's like, oh, and three other countries that are at war, and there are five new dictators. And this time is no different because we're back after a while to discuss very important and concerning and sad developments in Venezuela. How are you, El?
Hi, I'm doing okay. Uh, I guess it's been very hard to be Venezuelan lately, um, inside the country especially, given the new developments of what's happening back home. But also for everyone else outside of the country, and I want to send a big virtual hug to every Venezuelan that's trying to keep their lives going as if nothing is happening, trying to work, trying to live your lives, and then you have to go on your phone to find out that things keep getting progressively worse. I had this conversation, Hermana, with so many people, and I want to have it with you. But it's been in over the last week, especially. It's been a very common occurrence that you just go on Teams and you send a message to your manager. You're like, I can't. I can't work today. I'm sorry. Or you're crying in between meetings, or you work in service and you're giving it your best, and then you go to the back of the kitchen and then you cry your heart out because it's so rough.
Yeah,
Everything that's happening right now. So a
I
big a
actually,
big hug to everyone who's going through that,
that's
and
how
obviously a
we're
big hug.
connected.
We are connected, and a
We're
big hug to
connected.
everyone back home. Obviously,
Yeah, and no, it's amazing, and it's sad that we all like have been feeling this way. I actually missed 2 days of work the week after the elections because I was like in the black of anxiety, and like, I mean, I'm a journalist. I need to use my brain to write about other stories, and I could not focus because what I call my anxiety spiral. It's just like the wave of the same thought, and you can't stop looking at the phone. And yeah, 8 million Venezuelans abroad. I know we felt that way, and it was a sad situation, but it was also comforting to see the messages and the posts of other Venezuelans all around the world in all types of industries describing the same feeling, like Venezuelans heartbroken around the world. And that's hard to explain that connection. And it's also why it's so important to speak up about what's going on in Venezuela and that people are aware. So, those bosses, those coworkers understand when they see their Venezuelan coworker struggling. It's so because that's part of what's so hard and lonely that a lot of the times your coworkers have no idea what's going on, and you're showing up there, and and they might not understand to the level, right? Because they have democracy privilege. So it's hard to even understand. Like, there was an election, and Maduro saying he won and he didn't. And like, to an American, like, that heartbreak is, they can't understand the level because it's a 25-year-old heartbreak for us. Me and my cousin were saying, this is a sadness always in the back of our mind. It's like when you lose a parent young. I know both things. You'll get over it, you live your life, you go around the world, but in the back of your brain, it's always the Venezuelan tragedy. And the 8 million Venezuelans, now we have that pain activated because the situation
yeah.
is so. But when it's not, when nothing is happening, that pain's still always in the background. And it's a particular experience.
And it's also weird trying to explain the situation to someone that's maybe not as informed, in terms of what's happening. Because it also happens to me a lot that people that may know a little bit about the situation in Venezuela, um, they ask like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, they stole the elections," and they're like, "Yeah, don't they do that all the time?" And I'm like,
Right.
like, yeah, but like it's different this time. Like, there's so much context that you're missing, right? But like, yeah, that's what they do. That's what we
That's a
thought that
good
they would
point.
do.
Yeah, that's also a good point. That's how they'll respond. And to be fair, like, I get why they respond that way. But that makes it even harder and more frustrating because we feel like everyone's like over our tragedy.
Yeah, and I was talking to my cousin. He's like, he was born in Venezuela, but he moved out of the country very young. Their parents moved out of the country very young, during the 2002-2003 crisis in Venezuela. So he says he's not as connected with what's happening back home as you would be giving your background, or I would be giving my own background, right? And that's fine. That's fine. I cannot be judgy about someone who's not connected to what's happening back home, right? But he told me something that, like, I did not I did not need to hear that at that time, but he told me, like, oh well, like, I haven't been paying too much attention because based on what happened before, it's going to be in the news cycle for a couple weeks, and then everyone's going to forget about it and nothing's going to happen. And I'm like, ouch.
And you bring up another great issue, not just like Americans or Canadians understanding our plight, but also other Venezuelans who have decided to disconnect. My own cousin who lives in England, that's the route she's taken. For my mental health, for my new life, I no longer look at the news in Venezuela. I am disconnected. And that was hard for me to accept because I'm so intense and we talk every day. And this is like, but I kind of had to like respect her boundaries and like she respects mine. And I have to, this is something I've been thinking about. I mean, she left when she was older than me. I left really young and younger than a lot of people who have decided to disconnect. But for me, it's as present as ever. Like, I don't know. I think it's also because politics is my passion and like it just happens to fit who I am. And like, I have not disconnected one bit. And I left when I was 11 years old.
Yeah, and like it feels like a lot of people don't like that because it feels like it's a moral thing to like fight for what's happening, but we already talked about the effect that this has had on our own mental health and
Yeah.
everyone else. So like, if you,
We are aware. We understand if someone would not want to go through.
I understand. I understand, and I cannot blame them. I'm not gonna do it. I have to care just because the person who I am and the things that I've gone through and the things that my family have gone through. So is your case, but I can't blame anyone who just decides to, you know what, I'm just gonna live my life because it's very rough. It's very rough. I've had days this past week where I couldn't get out of bed until like 3 p.m. waking up like in the morning just because I was so anxious and depressed and just on my phone looking at the situation back
Yeah,
home.
on Sunday, like the night of the election, I remember it was similar to actually the 2016 Trump election. Like in the sense that I remember, I didn't want to see the results, so I like was sleeping, but then I would get up and just like quickly check, and then go back to sleep, and then quickly check and freak out, and like that all night.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was feeling up until the day of the election. So maybe let's do a recap of what's happening,
Let's do a
so
little
we can all be on the same page.
So, I mean, I think it's important for us to note, Elu, because on this show, you and I always say elections and dictatorship do not work and people shouldn't believe them. So, I think for both of us, we were quite skeptical when this process was coming along. This is the product of negotiations, the negotiations that we don't really support a lot on this show. Where were these negotiations? I'm already Barbados. Which ones were this ones? But anyway, one of the negotiations, and the U.S. government basically told the Venezuelan regime will remove sanctions if you go to free elections. The moment this treaty was signed, Maduro started breaking the rules. He banned Maria Corina Machado from running. He, of course, that's a given, uses all the state resources to intimidate and buy voters. But the opposition, highly pushed by the US, which is their main ally, decided to participate in this process. The only opposition leader left from like the old times is Maria Corina Machado. She's like waited her turn. However, she was not allowed to run, as I just said. Then they found a lady who was a university professor with impeccable history, had not been involved in politics. Maduro also didn't let her run. This, of course, is happening while Maduro has fake opposition contenders that have bought into the fake election. But for some reason, I don't really understand why. Finally, the opposition and Maria Corina Machado find a candidate in Edmundo Gonzalez. He used to be a diplomat. I don't really know why they let Edmundo Gonzalez.
So Edmundo was not like the president elect of Venezuela, Edmundo Gonzalez, is not is not a guy that most of us knew like 5 months ago who he was, right? What I believe what happened was is that as a backup plan, and we're gonna talk about, and I want to talk about how smart Maria Corina Machado and her leadership team have been about all this, because they just like
And that's the point that I want to drive through. Like, they, again, elections are not fair in dictatorship, but Maria Corina Machado and her team did it the best way you could
the
do
best possible way that you could have done it. She did it, and one of the things that they did is that they had, yes, this like public candidate that was going to run on her behalf, the Corina Lloris, I think what's her name. She was not allowed to run. However, Edmundo Gonzalez was able to sneakily, kind of like under the radar, sign up for the election, right?
Right.
So
He was the backup.
he was like the backup of the backup, and like because he was so under the radar, his name was not mentioned anywhere. He was allowed to like sign up for the election, and then
I get
after
the chills. This is real revolutionary shit.
Yeah.
Both Corina and Edmundo are older people.
Yeah.
They lived plus democracy. They
Yeah.
are, again, they haven't put their face out there, and they are risking it all.
Absolutely.
And they're like, they look like cute grandparents, and that's what has been so brilliant. That these are not faces like Leopoldo Lopez and even Maria Corina that have been burned for 20 years of being out there against the regime. This is, and how are you going to call Edmundo? I mean, they're still doing it. They're calling him a terrorist, but they have nothing to stand on because Edmundo has never been an opposition leader. He's never so much as told people go out into the streets to protest.
I believe
Of
he
course,
was ambassador of Venezuela in Argentina.
diplomat, yes, yes.
Many years ago. I think even before chavismo. So again, he was very under the radar, and they went ahead with him, and he was again an unknown person. But
And it was a very short campaign, by the way, because this happened, like, he didn't have as much time to campaign as Maduro did. This was months.
yeah, and but again, props to the leadership of Maria Corina Machado and her team.
So, yeah, to get Edmundo's face recognized around the country, because we have to talk about, so Maria Corina, who was not the candidate, went around the country as if she was campaigning with Edmundo's picture. And I mean, again, the way people responded to her really like showed us that this was going to be different in terms of the massive voting response, because the opposition a lot of the times has decided not to vote because it's a fraudulent election. But anyway, let's jump right back on it. July 28th, it's clear what's happening. All exit polls, which cannot usually be trusted, but they're all going the same way. Even I was surprised by this bank. What is it called? Barclays. That had like, their advice was like, it's most likely there's going to be a transition in Venezuela. That's the one that got me. I was like, don't play with me like this.
Even more for me, this is like horrible when you think about it, but again, alas, capitalism. They had a betting sites. They have betting sites on who's going to win elections, and the betting sites were leaning heavily towards Edmundo Gonzalez. So
I would have never bet on that. All my hope and everything, like, I could have told these people it's not happening. Like,
well, if you put your money in it, you would have made some money. Because even though Maduro.
Let's say the game is not over, because Maria Corina Machado, what's the saying? Hasta el final, until the end.
Yes.
She's saying in January, Venezuela will have a new president.
Amen.
So, so yeah, it's clear that Edmundo Gonzalez won the election. And here is the brilliant part, because I'm pretty sure Maduro also stole the 2013 election from Capriles Radonsky. There was just no way to prove that. Maria Corina, though, apparently has literally been studying political science and learning from all the mistakes. And her team managed to get people at the voting booth level to document the las actas, the voting tallies that would come out of the machines.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposition got their hands on over 80% of those tallies. Like they have the results
Yep.
in a website were publicly available. They managed to do this, by the way. Again, a lot of emphasis on Maria Corina Machado, but the protagonists here are this Venezuelan citizen
Absolutely.
who those electoral witnesses. Even I've heard some of the military people from El Plan República, which are supposed to be the ones taking care of the voting booth. They acted to document the reality of how people were voting. And after that, they stayed at the tables to make sure that their votes were secured. And after that, the Venezuelan citizen has continued raising their voice. So, as we stand right now, unfortunately, we go back to the theme of this show, the axis of evil versus the democratic powers. They countries that are democratic, like the United States, Chile, under a left-wing government, have not only told Maduro to show the proof of his victory, they have acknowledged the evidence of fraud shown by the opposition. And that is the key, because their friends, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, they're just saying, oh, they're having an internal issue. This has to be decided in Venezuelan courts. Maduro, please show the evidence. No mention of the evidence that he massively lost the election. And they are asking, they want to wash their hands as they always do and say, well, we don't mingle in other countries' businesses. Venezuela's Supreme Court and courts should take care of this. Again, this is the issue. Venezuela's a dictatorship. There are no independent courts. And we go back. Elections under dictatorship are a very uphill battle.
To an extent, though, because, and again, this goes back to the brilliance of the leadership of Maria Corina and the braveness of the people, everyone, the hundreds of thousands of people who were part of the comanditos, as she calls it, to make sure that we got the tallies, right? After the elections were stolen, it was hopeless night, horrible night for everyone, because again, even though we know it's a dictatorship, we always have hope that they're just gonna give way eventually. Obviously they didn't, but just a few days later they posted every tally that they got their hands on online, every proof that they had available to prove that indeed the election was won by Edmundo Gonzalez and not by Maduro, and even though in the first few days these allies of Maduro, Mexico, Lula in Brazil, and Petro in Colombia, they were asking for like the institutional way to fix this. In the last few days, yesterday actually, for example, Brazil came out and said, look, we're not gonna take anything that comes from the Supreme Court because we know the Supreme Court is not independent. So the way that Maria Corina Machado, because if it was different, if it was a different leadership, if we had a leadership like we have in 2013, it would just be a matter of, okay, we lost, let's protest and let's call it a day. And it's easier for the allies of the regime to just say, they won, whatever.
1,000%. I mean, that's what I was saying. If Maria Corina didn't have the actas, all Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico would be congratulating Maduro, fully well knowing the reality.
Yeah, but the way that Maria Corina team collected the evidence and the massive, like, this wasn't a close election at all. This is like 67% to 33%.
It makes me so proud of Venezuelans, because again, these are people that were threatened that, like, if you don't vote for Maduro, your food is going to be taken from you. If you don't vote for Maduro, that squad's gonna come to your house and kill your kids. And these people did it anyway.
And mind you, this is an important point. Mind you, this is 67 to 33% ish. We don't know the 100% of the votes, without taking into consideration that a quarter of the population lives out of the country, and
Can you
99
imagine us adding at least 6 million votes to Edmundo?
and part of the strategy of the regime is not allowing people outside of the country to vote. I couldn't
Unless you
vote.
are, unless you are Yulimar what's her name? That
Yulema
lady got.
Rojas, the
This is a perfect example to show how authoritarianism works and why what we were just talking about. It's so like a lot of people don't understand why Venezuelans wouldn't support like an amazing athlete like Yulima Rojas. Well, she's pro Maduro and she was in Paris during the election and they gave her own voting booth. She's not a resident of Paris. They didn't let us vote where we are, but because she's a propaganda image for the regime, there was Yulimar voting for Maduro in Paris, and Venezuelans got so talk about a communal anger. That's
yes.
that's like how we drain though. Like the memes were so good. They were like, tell Yulimar to go jump into shit. I can't try to translate to what they really said.
It's been the communal outrage that Venezuelans have right now of everything that's happening, and in part as a response to what the government's response has been
We're gonna get into yeah,
very
which
very brutal. There's this thing. There's war tibio, which is going around in the Venezuelan community right now, which is a lot of people. No one can like hide what's happening in Venezuela unless you're like an ally for the regime. But there's always a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm not gonna take a side. I just want peace and love for everyone in the country. And right now we're not even taking that because we can't take that. It's not a us. It's not a this team versus
I'm
this
so
team.
proud. Every Venezuelan feels like a warrior in this fight. I feel like all of us. I mean, I tweeted something like every Venezuelan outside Venezuela has to be activated, and people were like, "Activo from Madrid, from Tokyo." Like, what can I do? Like, we're all how can we be a soldier in this fight?
Yeah, we're all trying, especially like obviously people back, and we're gonna get to what's happening back home because it's we haven't gotten to this point ever in
And
the
I do
history.
want to, in this transition though, Edu, I want to talk about all the people that have reached out to us from the countries we always talk about here, and they get it. Ukrainians, Nicaraguans, Cubans,
Iranians.
Belarusians, Syrians, Iranians, how they get it.
Yeah.
Honestly, they have that connection that I feel our cause has to theirs is everything. And like we always say, we gotta unite because our plight is so similar. I mean, particularly to Iran, where they do these fake elections, they have a fake opposition. Um, and they're also as angry as we are because I was talking to Elika, an Iranian who does videos about Iran in English, and we bonded over the fact that we grew up with parents telling us how amazing Iran and Venezuela once was, and we
Yeah.
never got to see it. And that's part of like that fire in us. Like it's not fair. Like you stole something from me, and I wanna tell the world about it.
and
It's
and
like a very
and like we were saying before, that when you explain the situation to someone else, it's hard for them to kind of like comprehend what we're feeling. But I last time that I had that feeling that you had with your Iranian friend was I was in the bus, and I was just ended up talking to the guy sitting next to me. He's from Cuba, and when I tell him he's from Venezuela, his eyes changed, my eyes changed, and it was just immediate empathy. I didn't have to
connection.
explain what was happening. He didn't have to explain what was happening to his country to me, and we just bonded as if we both were Venezuelans or as we both were Cubans. So it is very important that we're united. Again, the fight in Venezuela is the same fight as in Cuba, as in Nicaragua, as in Iran, as in Syria, as in Hong Kong, as in
Mm,
Ukraine, as in so many countries that have experienced this new stage of the Cold War, in
yeah.
which democracies unfortunately are losing the battle to authoritarian regimes.
And now, really, to talk about the level of oppression, I kind of want to go back because both you and I, Il, were saying we haven't been able to pull away from the situation. I think it's because our backgrounds, like you said, I like really closely experience like oppression against like journalists. I saw what they do to them, how mom had to hide, whatever. Experience this battle in a very personal way that's now probably triggering for you on the streets protesting. So Edu, I can see has been really affected by particularly the level of repression, which I really think we've never seen this level of repression in Venezuela. Maduro has gone farther than ever. And yeah, I'm gonna let Edu like talk about how they are really oppressing dissent because he has experience fighting that. And I think that's why he's been Edu went blue on Twitter. That's like the level that he's serious about spreading this message. So
So yeah,
tell.
so this is I can't believe like it's been less than 2 weeks since this all started, but it has devolved into a very serious situation. So after the elections are stolen, the leadership is like, calm down. We know it's been fraud. We have the evidence. We're gonna work our way through this. Organically, however, the people the next day came out in mass to the streets in every corner of the country because of the outrage of the situation happening. And you can see the images everywhere. The biggest outpour of outrage came precisely from the places
Mhm.
where chavismo and madurismo used to have their support, which is lower class neighborhoods in both in the big cities and everywhere else in the country.
Attic came out to protest. Latin America's biggest slum was
Yeah,
out there.
the biggest Latin America biggest. I don't know if it's bigger than some of Rio, but one of the biggest in Latin America came out in mass.
It was at one point. I don't know if my fact is outdated, but Petare was at one point.
But we're talking more than 1 million people living in a slum, and a lot of them came out in outrage for what's happening. The response of the government ever since has been unprecedented. So, like before, I'm gonna talk about 2017 and 2014. The way that the repression worked is that when there were demonstrations, they would use the usual tactics, tear gas, uh, pellets, whatever they can do to disperse the protesters. In addition to that, they would also here and then would use lethal tactics. They would straight up shoot at people, or they would try to push people over a bridge or whatever. And we had hundreds of people that died in many, many years of protest in Venezuela. They would go after leaders of the opposition at that time, specific like leaders, heads of the people who were protesting, and they would obviously during the protest would take people away and put them in jail. However, since I feel that the government knows that it's not like 2014, it's not like 2017 when you have a country divided in terms of what's happening. They know that pretty much the entire country, it's against them. They have started a new tactic for them, which is not a new tactic for totalitarian regimes, which is to spread terror among the population. And the way that they're doing it is that not only they're putting people that are going to protest in prison, not only they're going for people that are leaders of the opposition to put them in prison, they essentially have devolved into the Gestapo or the worst of the Soviet Union, KGB, or Cuba, right? Which is essentially we will not allow any type of dissent. They are encouraging citizens, their own supporters, to kind of rat out people.
Of course, the go-to tool of the Soviets and the commies, the
Yes,
snitching.
absolutely, and it's not even that it's people that have been protesting or people that have expressed publicly their support. It's even if you have like the thought of not liking Maduro, you can be denounced by a neighbor, and the police will come and
Well,
take
that's
you.
right. They're going after citizens, but it's very important to note, also that the first thing they started doing was going after the electoral witnesses, who are a huge threat right now to them.
Yeah,
So
they started going after the people who got the proof that the election was stolen. But now it's gotten to the point where the police will stop you in the street, check your phone, check
check your
for
phone.
any sign of dissent, and if you have like a message like "I don't like Maduro," you're going to jail. Maduro announced on national
At a
television.
protest.
Was that?
You also check your phone for protest pictures, etc. Like anything that will tie you to your rights as a citizen,
Yeah,
basically.
and again, it gets even worse because of the corruption of levels that we have back home. Even if you don't have anything, if you don't have money to pay out the cops who stop you, they're gonna take you to jail anyway.
And it's the levels are. I don't know, Edu, if you saw the picture of. I think they arrested someone who was like a local leader for Maria Corina, and you know how they very third world. They like have them pose with like the evidence of their crime,
Yeah,
and it was just a woman here and her phone.
yeah, that's
The
the
evidence was.
evidence. They are now marking the houses of people who are suspected to be on the opposition to Maduro. Again, not necessarily political leaders, just people who voted against Maduro. They're marking their houses with graffiti at night so the police can come during the day and take them away.
And we gotta mention the biggest kind of move, institutional move. Maduro literally told people don't use WhatsApp, and then he blocked Twitter.
Yeah.
So that's on a level. I mean, yeah, Gestapo levels, China levels.
Yeah, it's not this is unprecedented for Venezuela. It's Venezuela has been for the longest time an authoritarian regime. Dictatorships, like many things, are a spectrum. So it's not like you're either a democracy or a dictatorship. When you're a
And by the
dictatorship,
way, that's how this dictatorship has managed to keep so many allies with that little game that they play by not going fully. You know, they say, well, they have WhatsApp, they have Twitter. Everyone here can say whatever they want.
yeah,
And that has really, when I talk to people about Venezuela being a dictatorship and they don't believe it is, oftentimes they'll be like, everyone in Venezuela can say whatever they want. Look at them on Twitter.
yeah. So and that goes to the next point, which I think it's important to make, is that there after everything that has happened, again, summary, elections were stolen, people didn't like it, and Venezuela is now a totalitarian regime. It's not an authoritarian regime, it's a totalitarian regime. I think that after July 28th, we reached a point of no return. For better or for worse. It could be for better. You know, if the stars align, if Maria Corina and her team manage to pull off a miracle, eventually we could transition into a democracy. But for worse is that it's what's effectively the government is trying to do. It's just turn the country into a totalitarian pariah state.
And we do have to, in my analysis, I have to, like, the military is fundamental in this. And if you're making an analysis of which way it's going to go, unfortunately, the military continues to block the way in Venezuela because Maria Corina has done it the best way she can.
Yeah.
There's not really getting around the military without international assistance, which is not really an option in 2024. And you can see that's part of Maria Corina's strategy because she has issued some messages to the military. However, to me, again, if I was betting on the situation, that's not going to work. The military is like a fundamental base of this system. It's Padrino Lopez is Russia's ally till the end.
Yeah.
You bring in the drug trafficking that has completely corrupted the military. I think it all falls down to that, and I don't see that getting out of the way. It's my analysis anyway. I try not to, by the way, before the elections because Venezuelans were so hopeful. I didn't talk about the elections until after because I did not want to be the party booper, and who am I to tell Venezuelans not to have hope? I thought it was good that we went through this, but as a political scientist, this is my analysis. Like it all falls down to that.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. And again, I haven't, in all honesty, guys, like I haven't been completely open about what I feel and what I think because I think there's
that was part of our duty, right? I didn't want to be saying things that wasn't the time to say them. Like,
exactly. But you know, if you've followed us, if you've seen our videos, if you follow us on social media, you know that from the get-go, we don't think that elections are a way to actually get these guys out of power. However, I was not, and I have to admit that I was kind of wrong. I did not expect that Maria Corina Machado and her team would pull something as amazing as they have done, in the sense of pushing the government into a
Yeah.
corner that they've never been in.
No,
However,
and if anything, this will advance the game regardless. Yes, the military, I don't think it's gonna turn to Maduro, but now, hopefully, if they have any dignity, Maduro really should lose all of his allies except Nicaragua and Cuba and Russia and Iran. But I'm talking about the ones that are trying to be democratic, like Colombia, Brazil. I mean, how, although I think Lula will still do whatever he wants
I don't.
and continue to.
Honestly, I don't think that. I don't want to think that Colombia and Brazil and Mexico will go all the way in as supporting this totalitarian regime, because again, this is a point of no return. The status quo that Venezuela had before, it's gone forever. Like that authoritarian regime, but people are trying to live as best as they can. They're trying to work and they're trying to, make a life for themselves or leave the country. That's out of the picture. Speaking of which, one other thing that the government is doing is that they are revoking passports for Venezuelans abroad and for Venezuelans inside of the country. My guess, if I had to guess, this is as to because the only real pressure that the governments of Colombia and Brazil have, and this is talking about real politics, not talking about what should be, what's good or wrong. In real politic terms, the only pressure that Brazil and Colombia have against the Maduro regime is a mass exodus of people, like we already seen in the past. 8 million Venezuelans have left the country.
And
If
there's going to be more after this. This is again for those of you who think this has nothing to do with you in North America. There's going to be a wave after this, another one.
there's going to be a big wave after this, and my guess is that the move of the government of revoking everyone's passports is precisely to try to prevent that from happening, trying to kidnap as many Venezuelans as they can inside of the country, keep as many Venezuelans out of the country as well. And if you reduce the numbers of people that are migrating because they have to Colombia and Brazil, then there's less pressure for these governments to actually push Maduro out. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not saying that they've won. I'm not saying that it's all over. I'm just saying that the strategy of the government is to move in that direction.
Of course. And again, because we as Venezuelans have seen a few of these cycles and what happens, they'll steal the election, then there's protests, and then usually the leader at the face of that movement has to either is put into jail or into exile. So that's another step here that we're yet to see. What are they gonna do with Edmundo and Maria Corina, and how are people gonna react after people have literally adopted Edmundo as Venezuela's grandpa and Maria Corina as their mom? Are they good? We've never seen. I have actually has seen it. They did it to my mom, but back then people still thought Chavez was great. They were gonna put my mom in jail, but since that, I mean, I guess they had the Judge Afiuni, but she wasn't she wasn't like an opposition leader. She was just. But I think the optics are different with a woman in Venezuela, particularly. Are they gonna put her in jail the way they did Leopoldo, or is Maria Corina gonna decide to go into exile? I'm sure she has thought and rethought this a million times, and she already knows what she's gonna do, but we don't know yet. So that's one of the things up in the air.
And
On the protest, sorry, Edu, on the 17th, it's the next big move.
yeah, on the
She has
17th of August.
And she's been very careful, right? Because in the past, if the opposition leader tells people to come out to protest, that's what they used to say, oh, she's inciting terrorism, whatever. As El mentioned, the protests that have happened have been pretty organic. And Maria Corina has been very careful, but now she's asked people in Venezuela and all over the world on the 17th to come out peacefully. So again, this is not something that's going to be decided on a day, and I think Maria Corina has been very wise in telling people that this is a fight that's going to take a little bit. It's already taken 25 years.
Yeah, it's already taking 25 years. It might take a few more months, and that leads me to another point, which is again, like what I said about the regime going totalitarian. I'm not saying that that's what I think it's going to happen in Venezuela. I'm just saying that's what the government is trying to do. However, I have faith in Maria Corina Machado. I don't like politicians never. I never liked politicians, with a few exceptions. But the way that Maria Corina Machado has over and over again over those last 6 months proven me wrong when I was thinking it's all over. There's no way that we can, get out of here. Every week she's doing something that just blows my mind. She's such an
And
amazing
also the
leader.
Venezuelan citizen, Elu, because I think to myself, like, how much more can the Venezuelan citizen withstand? That's also why I kind of given up on this route,
Yeah,
because it's like, are Venezuelans gonna keep, after seeing all that we've seen and the cycles and how it ends, are they gonna keep risking their lives?
they
The
will.
answer was yes.
They will. They are. And the I have faith. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what's happening backstage. But again, you know me. I'm very doomer about the situation in Venezuela, and even now, as things are, I have a lot of faith. So. What we can do for those of us who are outside of the country is to continue to spread the world of what's happening in Venezuela, and share anything that we get from our families and friends back home, who unfortunately cannot
Especially
really
now.
denounce what's
Now,
happening.
exactly. Now it's so much more important because Venezuelans either don't have access to Twitter or face the threat of getting put into jail if they say anything on Twitter. So, those of us that are outside, I mean, we need to be activated and be annoying. Like, people ask me, what can I do? Like, I'm just a person. You become that annoying Venezuelan. So, little by little, like, people might not realize, but it gets into their psyche what's going on in Venezuela. And that's who I am. Everywhere I go, I'm annoying. And
Yeah,
I'm gonna remind people, do you know that people are being killed in Venezuela?
yeah,
Like, how are you? No, I'm not well because my people are being killed in Venezuela. And that's how in the first world you build. And we gotta fight the narrative because we're not gonna get into that today because it's too much. But the other side has money to spread their propaganda. We already saw the People's Forum New York City. I don't know if you saw them, Elu.
yeah.
They came, they did their protest saying hands up Venezuela, whatever. So the rest of us, we don't get paid for that. So let's do it in how we can, at work, at dinner with our friends, wherever. Spread the message.
And on the 17th, just if you can, inside of Venezuela, please be very careful when you do go out. Outside of the country, go out, talk to your Venezuelan friends. Not only to your Venezuelan friends, talk to your other friends. These people, at least for example, in my experience, I have many friends that have gone out for other types of protests. They've gone out for Black Lives Matters. They've gone out for Palestine. Now it's their turn to go out for Venezuela, and we have to be the ones to convey that message to them and make sure that this is a very important thing to us. This is not a reunion of Venezuelans outside of the country. This should be a protest of everyone that democracy lover, everyone who hates dictatorships and authoritarianism, who should be everyone.
And let's say our Nicaraguan friends, our Ukrainian friends, our Syrian friends, once they like find out how similar the situation is. I mean, I've seen so many of those countries join the protest. I saw two Russian girls in a protest for Venezuela in Argentina, and they were like super
We
passionate.
had we have
Um,
Iranian friends here in the Toronto protest, for example. Yeah.
so that's how we win. Again, nobody's paying us to do this, but we're the good side, and we can connect and make our voices loud enough.
And if you do want to
And
pay us, we'll take it. Because we do it for free, we'll do it for money. Don't worry about it.
literally, I continue getting accused of it. So
Might as well get
what
paid,
else?
right?
What else?
Uh,
Did we forget it?
I don't. I mean, probably we did. There's so many things going on, so like, there's no way that we can cover everything. But
Yeah,
yeah,
how about the US elections? We'll talk about that another
we'll
time,
ta-
guys.
well, the only other thing that I can think of, and again, this is just speculating and analyzing from our little spaces what's happening around the world, is that this is also a good timing internationally for what's happening in Venezuela for the opposition, because the regime usual allies are very busy with other things that are happening. Iran is very busy with Israel right now.
Very
Russia is
busy.
very busy by being invaded by the Ukrainians. I never thought I would say this, but Ukraine has invaded Russia back, and they're doing great apparently. So, and again, the usual democratic allies of the government are not really buying into their narrative. So, that's also something to have into consideration. Something to give you a little bit more hope. And yeah, we've been here for 45 minutes. I don't know what else to
And
talk about.
enough. All I'm gonna say though is it a coincidence that both Kamala Harris and Maria Corina are Libras?
Anyway,
By
anyway,
coincidence.
thank you guys for listening into this episode from the North. We will try to make a few more of these as the situation develops. And, you know, again, free Venezuela, and share that message with your friends, your family, everyone. Everyone needs to know about what's happening in the country. And yeah, bye.
Bye.